Now to get a look at the day's business news. And for that, I'm joined by Stephen Carroll. Hello.
Hello, Jade.
We're going to begin with the markets. How have things begun this week?
A surprisingly positive start to the markets over in Asia this week. This after those disappointing job figures out of the United States on Friday. That just had actually, in fact, left Wall Street in positive territory, and that's the lead that's fed into the markets today. In Japan, the country's posted its smallest current account surplus on record. This is a measure of the country's trade, the health of its trade industry, and the weak value of the yen, and also the huge import bills for Japan are said to have shrunk that surplus to a smaller level. The Nikkei, nevertheless, up 1.8%. Over in China, the shares in Shanghai back in business after the new year, up almost 2%, and the Hang Seng just managed to sneak slightly into the green there. So a positive picture across the board.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, here in Europe, the Eurozone's new banking regulator has said that weak lenders should be allowed to fail.
Yeah, it's quite a bold statement from Danielle Nouy, who's the French woman at the head of the single supervisory mechanism at the European Central Bank. Now, in an interview with the Financial Times, she said she wanted to make big banks more careful about their sovereign debt holdings. These are debt owned by countries' governments that are bought by banks. And this is an effort to break the vicious cycle between banks that bring down whole countries' economies or vice versa. Now, ahead of the bank stress tests due before November of this year, she said that we have to accept that some banks have no future and that we have to let them disappear in an orderly fashion and not necessarily try to merge them with other institutions.
All right, well, meanwhile, in Brussels, there's some very unhappy people about this new Swiss referendum that limits the number of immigrants in the country, isn't it?
Exactly, and among those is the EU's Justice Commissioner Viviane Reding, who's unhappy at these new rules, which will affect the movement of EU workers into Switzerland. EU nationals have had the right to travel and work in Switzerland freely since 1999. This referendum may change that, though. Now, Viviane Reding told the Financial Times that the EU's four fundamental freedoms of people, goods, capital and services are not separable. And she said the single market is not a Swiss cheese and you can't have holes in it, so perhaps implying that there'll be some changes ahead for the EU's relationship with Switzerland.
All right. And here in France, taxi drivers are staging protests because of what they say is unfair competition. Yeah,
that's the second strike in a month by drivers here in France. They're unhappy at competition from private hire companies like Uber, which are able to operate with fewer restrictions and lower licensing costs. Now, the government has tried to level the playing field for taxi drivers, but the measure introduced was struck down by France's Council of States. They've gone back to the drawing board, as Delano de Souza now explains.
Back blocking the streets, taxis in Paris have called for a strike on Monday over competition from private hire companies. In December, the government had introduced a bid to protect traditional taxis from outside competition. Private companies like internet-based Uber would have had to wait 15 minutes between receiving an order and picking up a client. But according to France's top administrative court, that's not legal. Taxi drivers say they're at a disadvantage because of the high cost of licenses and heavier regulation.
If rules are respected, then everyone has the right to exist. For us to be better in comparison to where we are today, to say we are here, and that we will respond to the needs of our client.
The latest ruling has provided private hire companies with much-needed relief. They say they've done nothing wrong and have only adapted to the needs of the client.
We come from a world of transport, the service of transport. We have evolved to the service of people, and today it's clear taxi drivers are more and more sensitive to this. Things need to be done.
The latest setback has sent the Hollande government back to the drawing board. It will create a panel to examine how best to protect French taxis. Drivers participating in Monday's strike will assemble at Paris's Charles de Gaulle and Orly airports. They are expected to make their way to the centre of Paris, clogging traffic.
Let's take a quick look now at some of the day's other business stories, and we'll start with Barclays, which is investigating the leak of 27,000 customers' personal details. According to the newspaper The Mail on Sunday, the data included information on customers' passports, earnings and even their health status. It was stolen and sold. The bank says it's notified regulators of the inquiry and that it'll be working with authorities to find out who's responsible. Vodafone is expected to make a bid of €7 billion for the Spanish cable firm ONO this week. Reports in Spain's Expansión newspaper says the firm's board will consider the offer at a board meeting tomorrow. ONO is one of the few remaining cable businesses in Europe that hasn't been snapped up by bigger firms like Vodafone or Liberty Global. And the world's largest steelmaker ArcelorMittal is said to be considering buying the Italian firm Ilva, according to local media. The company was put under special administration by the Italian government last year after becoming embroiled in an environmental scandal at its plant in Taranto in southern Italy. Ilva accounts for around 30% of Italy's steel production.
Right, finally, mobile gamers have gone into mourning over the weekend after a well-known bird became distinct.
Yeah, this is the smartphone app Flappy Bird. It's a game which sees players pilot a little bird around a series of obstacles. You can see some of them there. It's been an online craze. Much love for the tiny Flappy Bird. Became the most downloaded app on the App Store, in fact. Last week, the creator, Dong Nguyen, said that Flappy Bird was making more than $50,000 a day in ad revenue. However, he did decide that he's actually going to pull the app from the App Store in an announcement he made on Twitter. On Saturday, he said, 22 hours from now, so that was in fact Sunday, I'll take Flappy Bird down. I can't take this anymore, he said. He later clarified the move wasn't for legal reasons and the game wasn't for sale. He just decided he was going to take it down. I suppose nature, even online nature, abhors a vacuum. Now, there's already a Flappy Bird clone topping the download spot that's been taken by the app. But lots of people mourning the loss of Little Bird.
Yep, game over. All right, thanks very much for that, Stephen Carroll. It's time now to look at the French papers, and for that I'm joined by William Hildebrand. Hello.